Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thursday. Week is just passing us by at light speed. Welcome to the MSP Initiative. We have a new guest with us today, Lon from BitTitan, which is the name I'm sure many people recognize. How are you doing today, Lon?
I'm good, George. Any better and I'd be retired.
I hear you, man. I hear you. So for anyone that doesn't know you or BitTitan, why don't you go ahead and give people a little bit of background about the company, and then why don't you go ahead and give people a little bit like of a professional background on yourself, right? Where did you start? How do you get to today being, the head of all things sales at BitTitan, and kind of give us a walk down memory lane.
Sure. So for those who don't know BitTitan, we started in 2007. G-Man Yip, who is our wonderful and fun-loving CEO, started with Microsoft, built some capabilities that Microsoft wasn't willing to build at the time. BitTitan continued to progress, started as a channel company and continued to progress with its partners. So as partners had new needs for automation, primarily revolving around migration, we continued to build that at things from mails, changing and adding sources and destinations, documents, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams now is the big thing, and so on and so forth. And then, as you guys may or may not seen, there's a new division of BitTitan over the last 6 months or so called Valir, which takes our automation concept of how we built our migration side and helps create a platform that's usable by partners to utilize the automation theories and concepts behind BitTitan for their needs and what they need to do.
Interesting. I did not know that. That's new.
Yeah, it is new. Myself, I come from a non-technology background. Before I was a soldier and a police officer. Not exactly a good field to be in anymore, right? Moved into distribution, worked at Tech Data in the early days of cloud. I've only ever been in cloud and worked with MSPs, shifted over to BitTitan, helped build their global distribution business. I now am responsible for that business globally. We have 200 plus distributors and I manage a team of 8.
Wow, it's a lot of distributors. What counts as
Yeah.
a distributor these days, Lon?
Believe it or not, we have distribution in New Caledonia, Fiji, uh, just about everywhere. I kind of wanted to make sure BitTitan was covered completely across the map as it relates to distribution.
Fiji sounds nice.
Bro, I signed Fiji so that I had a reason to go when they start succeeding with us. So we've got a revenue threshold for Fiji, and we'll have to have an in-person QBR soon.
For sure. So I think Microsoft's having one of their larger kind of online conferences of the year right now called Ignite.
Yeah.
Is that still going on or is that over now?
Ignite is still going on a bit. We have a lot of our sales team technical side engaged. Ignite's more of a technical conference versus Inspire in the past, which is where, we typically interact in those kinds of events. So yeah, Ignite's still going on, people, cool. Partners getting a lot of info from Microsoft.
Yeah. Any worthwhile highlights to bring up this call or still going on and don't know enough?
I still going on and I don't know enough. There's lots of new capabilities that Microsoft is adding to Teams on a regular basis. So, more information about that to come, but I don't know the details just yet.
No, fair enough. So, if memory serves, right, and this is going back a ways, and granted, I mean, things have obviously in technology world go at a crazy speed. But I remember back in the day, now this is going back to what, 20, maybe early or late 2000s, right? Microsoft Business Productivity Suite. Remember that? BPOS?
Yeah. That was when I entered. When BPOS was created was when I started my technology career. Yeah.
Got it. So obviously the evolution turned into Office 365 and then now Microsoft 365. So that was the early goings. And then, let's just take a look at from an MSP standpoint, how things are going, right? Because you have a unique view. You have a very tight partnership with Microsoft. there are some people out there from an MSP point of view that said that Microsoft never got the MSP space and that all they did was just deal with us, not work with us. And that, there's a constant channel conflict maybe between Microsoft selling things directly to the street versus MSPs working in partnership with them. Where do you lean on that conversation? I mean, now we're in 2020, things may be different, but historically that's been the feel, I think, on the street.
Yeah, man, I've lived that argument and conversation on both sides of the fence, and I think Microsoft needs partners, right? They can't get the delivery and they can't get access to the end users without the partners, right? The core of our business, whether remote or in person, is relationships. So do I feel that Microsoft has sometimes battled the channel in an inappropriate way? Yeah, I think they have. Ultimately, I think the partners that have succeeded are the partners who built their business. Yes, the technology is the underlying thing, but they built their business on the services and relationships and value that they have, and not relied on Microsoft to generate or provide the value. And the same could be said for Google as well, right? It really doesn't matter who the core vendor is. All of them could be said to be in conflict with the channel to some extent. It matters how the partner absorbs that technology, adds their flavor, packaging, or coding on it, so to speak, right? Good example there would be Starbucks, right? Coffee's coffee, but for some reason you pay for Starbucks coffee $5 a pop, right? Same coffee, different packaging, right? Different.
The price point boggles my mind, by the way. I still don't get it, but
bro, I use it in business principles on a regular basis, man. Anyways, the same holds true for partners. It's how an MSP packages themselves. Microsoft's the core technology, but not the value of what they're selling and building things around it, right? Customizing Teams integrations, things like that.
I hear you, but as time has gone on, just taking an Exchange mailbox and throwing it in the cloud, which, by the way, I've been saying for years, even way before, like, I was heavy into BPOS when it came out because I never wanted to see another server ever again, premise-based. All things being said, there's some benefit to the fact that I don't want to deal with it, and it makes sense to move it somewhere else if that's the case. But Microsoft, since that time, has really pushed into virtual desktop. They've really pushed into managed workstation in the cloud. Azure, I mean, is a big word, but there's a lot of things where they're trying to like just totally virtualize the plumbing, if you would, of what these potential customers would use. So, and then, recently, right, they started saying, hey, with M365, when you sign into a device that's Windows 10 enabled, we're going to start pushing down, Intune. We're going to start pushing down, filtering. We're going to start managing the Microsoft firewall and antivirus solution, Defender. It's feeling a lot more MSP-ish. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. Where I totally get that point that MSPs, that encroaches on the MSPs. Part of what I would venture to say is that intunability and things like that, very few end users, at least in the SMB space and into the mid-market, have the ability to manage that Intune piece, right? And what Microsoft, again, I'm putting on a Microsoft hat right now. What Microsoft is, I feel Microsoft is doing is they're saying, here's the proper tools for you as a partner to manage this commoditized product in a fast and efficient way so that you can get on to other things.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's kind of fair. I mean, it's how serious do you think Microsoft is for sub-100 employee organizations? Really, honestly.
That's a great point. You know what I mean? They've played with their ranges a little bit. But they've always stayed away from the SMB space because it's the economies of scale, right? It's why distribution exists. It's why MSPs are there to provide value at those levels, right? Microsoft will get all up in your business for enterprise stuff, right? They'll go all in, right? Most of the time, they'll drag a partner with them, most of the time. But as it relates to deals under 500 seats, they tend to stay away, right? A lot of their features, functionalities, and capabilities related to MCS or fast track, things like that don't even apply to those ranges.
Okay.
They rely on partners to do it.
Fair enough. I mean, I've just been monitoring the social media feeds of out there, and Microsoft during I think over the last 48 hours has formally launched something called Lighthouse,
Mm.
which seems to be a consolidated RMM-ish style view, if you would, for things like device monitoring and stuff like that. Is this their shot at RMM, or what is that?
You know, I've often seen an odd relationship between them and the RMMs of the world. I haven't looked at all the features of Lighthouse, but I wouldn't doubt it. You know, man, I hate to sound so pro Microsoft, right? But it could be viewed either way, right? I think if Microsoft is providing something like that to partners, an RMM capability, it's got to be cheaper than what's out there now, right? If not free or part of the partner program, is part of the potential value. Where I think Microsoft has, I don't know, overstepped, for lack of a better term, in some cases as it relates to MSPs, is letting the MSPs decide how they go to market and who they go to market with and after, right? That's the part where, as long as Microsoft is creating, or Google, or any of the core vendors, as long as they're creating technology that a partner can consume and use to drive value, I think they're saying okay. The minute they take away the ability for a partner to engage, that engagement is the stickiness, and I don't think Microsoft can ever replace that, right? Again, it goes back to relationships. You utilize relationships to deliver quality service that generates value. It's not the product that's generating value, it's the service and support that's generating value. Like you said, whether it's cloud or on-prem, email is still email. There's no more groundbreaking things that can be done around that.
Okay, fair enough. I hear what you're saying. So from the topic of this, the title of this session was Cloud Now.
Yeah.
Haven't we always been doing some sort of cloud? What is like back in the early mid and late 2000s, cloud was just the evolution of the word hosted.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what does
yeah.
cloud mean to you? What is the definition now of cloud, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And what I mean by cloud now is that there has always been certain segments or verticals of the business from a consumer perspective that have rejected cloud, albeit a smaller percentage, right? But whether it be government or education or mom and pop shops who are like, I can do, it's dead technology now, but I could do some form of an SBS server setup in my 5-person company. Those guys are needing to evaluate cloud. They can't put a box under their utility sink in their closet anymore, right? No one, still to this day, I don't think anybody expects a company to be 100% cloud. BitTitan's close. We're probably about 75 to 80% cloud, but we do still have some on-prem servers. But we have more than 50 products that we pay as you go, right, for consumption. Things from Salesforce to security lockers, all kinds of things like that. But I think Gartner's saying that 88% of consumers are being forced, of corporations are being forced to work from home now. That forces virtual desktop, different segments of cloud to be adopted that may not have been adopted before. I think we could all say email is pretty ubiquitously accepted as a cloud first tool now, but desktops weren't, right? Desktops and some forms of collaboration weren't, and all that kind of stuff. But now, my kid's using Teams on a Chromebook to go to school.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So
Sure.
Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, right? These are supposed to be the replacement tools to a file server with a share, and being able to authenticate stuff, right?
Yeah.
How realistic, what is the size, how realistic is it for somebody to really exist in that way, right? What is the magic number where things start to break down?
I don't know if there's a magic number to break down, but the new thing related to teams that we're seeing partners getting more engaged with is and far more widely accepted, is honestly rebuilding the old SharePoint concept, right? And what I mean by that is SharePoint and CRM were very niche partner types that could do it, right? Because there was a lot of sprawl when you went into SharePoint, and it could go as complex as full-on website hosting and as simple as a file share and using OneDrive, right? Um,
Mhm.
Teams, I think, brings a lot of that in together, and where the partners can interact better and drive success with teams is controlling sprawl, right? We're seeing, sometimes 2-to-1 teams versus employees. That's kind of silly, right? You don't need 200 teams for 100 employees. It's so
Okay.
again, where the value comes in is, and Microsoft can't provide that, is the partner coming in, helping draw an outline and a template for how an end user should use teams, segmentation, how do they create teams, what should these teams include, which employees should be members, and how to properly set up teams. And there's not much licensing costs or any excess licensing costs of that. It's all in service and value drive of the partner. So
Mhm.
I think that's where the future of all those things condensing down a little bit is in the team space, and partners and customers better utilizing that. So they're controlling costs, but far more of their employees are utilizing the cloud beyond email.
Okay, so let me ask this question then. Um, because of how diverse Microsoft's reach is, right? You said you have 200 plus distributors. I mean, people are selling 365 out underneath the Starbucks cup,
Yeah, for sure.
for lack of a better term. So, I'm not trying to get into a sales thing, but in all reality, right?
Yeah.
If I walk into a prospect who is already paying Microsoft directly and for 365, or if I walk into a prospect who's looking this way, change service providers, or if I walk into a prospect who has GoDaddy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and somehow GoDaddy sold them 365. It's not as simple as a couple of button clicks to just all of a sudden manage, take over, or handle what's already there, right? It's
Mm.
way more complicated sometimes, especially if there's these special variants of 365, like GoDaddy, for example, right? It's
Yeah,
not the
for sure.
full 365, it's like their special baked thing.
Yeah.
So like when you walk into those scenarios, how do you successfully, like at this point, a lot of the MSPs out there have a relationship with distribution entity. We all love our friend Ken Patterson from PAX 8, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
Ken, you're on here. Everybody has their CSE, CSP, with DISTI relationship, or if they're large enough, they're CSP1, and they're working direct with Microsoft. But like, you're trying to as much as you can cookie cutter things, right? So that you can get them into a bubble. But it's not that simple, right? So what's your view of this, right? Microsoft's kind of not made it easy to just go in and move it over, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is just my view. This isn't a BitTitan view, right? Is that it's become so commoditized, especially in the O365 space as it relates to email. As a partner, is the value or profitability even in the recurring margin of that product, or is it in the recurring service and support that you're providing that partner around those core products? So I would venture to, whenever I talk to partners about this and we get into this deeper business conversation, I say, does it even matter if you have control from a licensing perspective of the O365? The question is, can you lock them into a 3-year service and support contract revolving around that core product? And in my vision, I think it gives the partner more validity that they don't care about that, because they're coming in and saying, I want to do the right thing for you. The right thing, I think you picked the right technology. Let me help you manage and better utilize what you have, right? And as you go over time, if you need to adjust things, if you need to switch, as you figure out, I don't know if you guys have noticed behind the scenes, that switch or transition from one carrier or provider to another is becoming a lot more seamless on the back end, right? The only thing that requires a hard migration nowadays is when you're merging two companies or divesting a couple companies. But if it's changing responsibility behind the scenes, the GoDaddy one may be the last of the old school model, but a physical migration isn't required in most of those cases. Own the services. That's where you make all your money. Get an admin access account to their O365, and it really doesn't matter where it's managed or where it's hosted, I should say.
So, big picture though, isn't the idea to streamline, like an MSP wants to go in and sell their whole bundle of things, right? So if you're saying, hey, don't worry about where it is, just go in and say you'll manage it, at what point is, like, you're going to have to start making changes, right? You're going to have to start administering these accounts. There is no such multi-tenancy yet, right?
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
that's in a near us. We'll see. So, what do you tell the MSP that has 100 accounts and each one of these guys are in a bubble, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of my point from a technology management perspective. As long as you have admin access as the MSP provider, the technology essentially interacts the same. Yes, you're logging into different instances, and it's not as easy to manage under one bubble, but over time, built into your process. I guess what I'm saying is I would never charge an end user to handle that switch. I would build it into my recurring costs. And as things come into play where it's necessary to move under your umbrella, right? Whether it be the PAX8 umbrella for ease of management of all your clients or whatever, and you're tired of managing individual admin access, as it becomes necessary, you make the switch, right? That's the way I would handle it personally. And do it when the time's right. I guess what I'm saying is this is more of a sales and enablement motion than a technology motion. And all I mean by that is get in, establish a relationship, lock in high quality service that deliver value. And the things you need to move around from an operational perspective on the back end will happen over time and the end user won't be affected by it. I don't think it needs to be step number 1. It could be step number 10 that is 8 months down the road.
Okay. So the hot things right now, right, are cloud now, right? So you're
Yep.
saying Microsoft 365, maybe not even the lower tiers, right, going up. You're saying OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and some flavoring of Azure, right? That's cloud now.
Yeah, whether it's Active Directory, ADFS, Active Directory in Azure is a good option. I'm not even saying you need to fully lock in with Azure. What I mean by cloud now is these end users have to move now, right? And there's a lot of end users who don't know this technology and don't have the time to Google it themselves, right? All of us have purchased a car, especially in the modern times, where we go in and we research, I want a Suburban, this is how much it costs, this is how hard they are to get, this is the price I should pay. And then you walk into a dealer and say, I want a Suburban, I'm willing to pay X, and you're done, right? End users don't have the time for all this research. And there's a couple of things that are triggering this. One is because of COVID, a lot of end users who were not prepared to work from home are being forced to work from home. So whether it is the idea of getting Chromebooks, virtual desktops, whatever they're doing, there's 3 or 4 technologies that they have to move now, and they don't have the time to do the research. Therefore, they need to find an experienced MSP that they can trust to establish their new cloud principle, right? That's really what I mean by cloud now. And then from a partner perspective, it's the idea of not having to move everything at once. It is, if they're not in the cloud with email, get the email up and running, get that going. Collaboration is now the new second, right? Whether it's Teams, Zoom, whatever it is, collaboration is the new second. So you have to get that going. But it's to move things in stages based on importance. And then it's to switch from a model of instead of doing risk remediation, do risk aversion with these new customers to the cloud, which means I take your time on the assessment up front. However you do your assessments, take your time on the assessments up front, identify the roadblocks and objections, and handle those roadblocks and objections related to whatever it is that the project that you're moving for them to the cloud ahead of time, and that remediation up front, or sorry, that aversion up front will prevent any downtime on the back end. Remediation almost always ends up in downtime for an end user because you have to shut something off in order to fix it and move it. So that's really what I mean by cloud now. Not that anybody has to go 100%. It's that new people who have never been to the cloud need to go. And then this is the biggest year that Microsoft has had in a very long time of products reaching end of support. And obviously, go figure, I'm sure it was planned, all of them relate to the new M365, right? Windows Server is going away. Exchange Server 2010 is going away. Office is not being, Office 2010 is not being, is reaching end of support. So there's all these massive versions that were Microsoft's biggest versions to date are reaching end of support. And these customers are, not only they're happy to go to the cloud, they can't do it with the technology they have.
Okay, so when you go into these customers and you tell them, hey, listen, you got through part one of COVID, right? Who knows if there's a second wave, whatever, but it could happen. And we somehow shoestring through it, right? Duct tape, Band-Aid, bubble gum, whatever you want to call it. And you go to these guys and you're like, listen, it's time to rip all this stuff out. We need to start moving to the cloud. It comes at a cost. What's your value proposition? I mean, they're going to say, hey, we figured it out the first time. Why do we need to make a change now? What's your response to that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And part of the value prop of moving to the cloud is the idea of always being able to be current is one. The other is, especially in America, and that's really where we're talking about, the same story doesn't hold true in other places. But the idea in America that we pay as you go for everything from now your cell phone is not paid for up front, is paid for on a monthly basis. We're now in a society where we're comfortable paying for even products over time. So the value prop is, the risk is a lot lower. You don't have to worry about amortizing the value of products, on your taxes all the time. You're not buying equipment you don't need. And when you don't need it, you stop paying for it, right? So that's the value from a cloud perspective. The value from a partner perspective is the knowledge you already have, right? We spoke a little bit about, end users don't have the time or the ability to do research. So you come in as George's MSP and you say, I got you. Don't worry about it. Here's what everything is. You don't have to buy anything up front. I'm going to charge you $150 per user per month and you'll be running. The individual technology and stuff like that is not as important as you.
Okay, so not everything that they have today may actually fit in this new cloud model too, right?
Right.
That's part of the challenge, right? Like
it is.
Some people and I get there's different right? There's no one road, okay? But I think the part of the challenge and why everybody's so discombobulated of sorts is, one, how do I know if everything I have now is going to work on the other side? Two, how do I figure out the price?
Yeah.
Some of this stuff is consumption based and nobody wants to have the bill shot, right? They'll be able to quote a rate to their customer rather than telling them, hey, it's like the cell phone bill of yesteryear where if you went over your minutes, you got to get overage.
Yeah, that's a great point. And typically when we're doing these business conversations with partners, we talk about creating 3 offers, right? A good, better, and best offer. And each one requires more or less time from the MSP to be involved, right? And it allows the customer to control generally their cost. What percentage you mark up each one is really up to you, but the most successful partners who are MSPs at scale do this kind of model. 3 different types of engagement models. There is a certain number of hours factored into the good, better, and best model. You can't get away from hours to cover for, breakage or different things that may happen. Eventually, you'll get to a point to know on average how many hours you're going to have to work on a given project. But I'm just talking about partners who are moving into this model. Eventually, you'll get good enough that you'll be able to say, I know I'm going to spend 10 hours per month on customers that look like this, Therefore, I'm going to factor that into the better model, and that's the way it's going to be. The good model is very low level. I'm going to provide you reporting. I'm going to keep your stuff on. And if you go over, you're going to pay me $150 an hour if you go outside of this scope of work. Better is some of those hours are included, and I'm going to do a little bit more preventative and proactive management for you. And best is hands off, Mr. End Customer. Things aren't going to go wrong, and if they do, I got you right away, unlimited hours.
Okay, so how do you, like, if you're going into one of these projects, right? I'm going from on-prem into the cloud. How do you determine what the project is, right? I mean, short of going to a partner and having them help you, fair, that's an option. How do you estimate, especially for people who haven't done it regularly, how do you figure out, is this a 10-hour project, 15, 20? Like, there's the ongoing stuff afterwards I get. But, like, how do you figure out that initial hit?
Yeah, so in our world, you really have to divide it by workloads, right? So if you're talking about the core product of M365, right, it is, are they just moving mail? Are they moving to Teams? You know, and you have to look at each one of those workloads. Each one of those workloads is, in essence, its own project, right? We can certainly help you calculate from a email perspective. It's really easy. Each one of those workloads within Microsoft is relatively easy to identify how long it takes, right? The act of actually migrating takes, give or take, 15 to 20 minutes per user to migrate. How many users do they have? So on and so forth. So I could help you, you know, it's relatively easy to figure it out from a workload perspective. There are math equations that could be done. The other big thing, George, and this is why I was saying the assessment, the concept of assessment, whether you use a product or you have questionnaires or however you do it, assessments is crucial in identifying your cost to build, launch, or support that project going in, right? So it's really important to do the assessment correctly. You know, Pax8 has some cool stuff around dark web scans. We have some assessment capabilities.
I was just going to say, like, what does that mean? Are there, where's the go-to for how to do this, right? If I just go Google Microsoft how-to, I'm going to be deep in the weeds.
Deep in the weeds, yeah. So as it relates to O365, we have some completely free capabilities. We don't charge for it, called Health Check for Office 365 that allows you to run from our system in your end user and to identify, do all these systems meet the system requirements for O365, right? Whether it's deploying in a home desktop or whatever, it's checking OS, internet speed, all of those kinds of things. Version of Office helps you identify whether or not you need to upsell your end customer. Maybe you have 10 users that have a dead or dying version of Office. So we have that capability for sure. And then the same exists in other realms of Microsoft and Google for that matter to identify end user compatibility to a given software.
Fair enough. I mean, as much as that can help, right? I mean, everybody's situation is going to be different.
Yep.
What happens when you got to make a jump, like a real big jump between people who haven't upgraded for like Office 2010, till now, right? I mean, is there, do you have to stages to get to the end result, or can you make that jump in one shot?
Man, I don't mean to sound like a pitch, George, but you just set me up for that. In the Microsoft world, you do have to make jumps, right? You have to make jumps from old versions to newer versions before you can make the hop to O365 in our world. And honestly, that's why Microsoft is still one of the biggest purchasers of BitTitan, is that we don't have to do version hopping and we don't have to consolidate server farms, exchange farms. So that is a benefit of using a BitTitan versus free tools or hybrid. There is no version hopping for us.
Okay, so the question is, if you have the right tools, you can get there, but if not, you have to jump. You're gonna have to go like this.
Yeah.
Okay, which is gonna take a ton of time, right? I mean, there's no.
For sure. I mean, depending on the number of users, it does take time, and you know, while there there is a cost to using any tool, whether it's us or anyone else or any other vertical or product set. It does take time to, there is a cost to tools. Usually those tools, no matter what it is, their job is to automate what a partner is doing, reduces your cost of savings, or cost of time, which drives your cost of delivery down pretty substantially. In our world, it's somewhere between 5 and 10x is how much time we can save you. So if we're saving you 5 to 10 times the 5 to 10 times the amount of delivery time, you know, you're able to do one of two things: either drive up the profitability of that individual project, or allow yourself to compete at scale with larger guys, you know, the CDWs of the world or whatever, allow you to compete at those bigger scale projects. So, and get more projects is really our goal of what we're trying to do with and for partners.
Okay, so your pitch-ish, if you would, is if you're going to go into this, have the calculators and the assessment tools, then there is a cost to actually implement, right? There's a cost to make those tools run after you've done the initial homework. And that cost, you can either catch in some sort of project, one-time fee, or you can bake into the larger agreement after the fact. Do you know how many people go left versus right? Is there a standard, or is everyone's different?
There's really kind of classes of MSPs, right? There's MSPs, and I'm going to go ahead and say my definition of an MSP is a partner who provides ongoing managed services. I know that sounds very common sense, but very few partners actually do that, right? Compared to the larger ecosystem that is out there. So I would say that partners need to use those tools, reduce their costs, deliver the services upfront, and provide the long-term value to drive that. You know,
so is there a difference? Is there a difference in the tool set that you use to do the initial implementation, migration, deployment versus the ongoing monitoring, adjustments, tweaks?
It is. You know, we build ourselves to be in and out. There are other tools that provide long-term management. We specifically help with the automation of the migration up front. Sorry, back to the original question too. The partners there's a couple of different types of partners. There's those who charge project-based for migration up front and say, it's going to cost you $10,000 to migrate, and I'm going to charge you $50 a month to manage you ongoing, right? There's a very small subset, but it also is the most successful. MSPs with a high valuation are the ones who say, I'm not charging you up front, but instead of $50 a month, I'm going to charge you $75 a month, and you're locked into a 3-year contract, right? It's the idea of building the project costs into long-term valuation to the end customer, and then locking them into a multi-year contract. Small percentage, but high profitability on the right side, the side that does no upfront cost, but extended over time costs. The vast majority live on the left, which is, I'm going to charge you for the migration up front because it's a singular activity. It happens once, I do it, and then I'm doing many other things for you afterwards. So most partners are on the left, handful of partners are on the right. And we see profitability on both sides. Neither one is wrong.
Okay. And then when it comes to, and maybe this is just your view, right? Because you're in Microsoft land, like way more than most of the people watching this, is that Microsoft in their very, 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 very long terms of service say, hey, nothing's really backed up. You need to have a strategy for that. Right? I mean,
yeah,
more or less, that's what it says.
Even in their own language for as it relates to backup and legal holds and all that kind of stuff, they tell you smart money is you need a third-party backup. They even say it in their verbiage, right? Related to how things are backed up. It's kind of having the chicken and the egg in the hen house, right? Yes, there is geo redundancy in the Microsoft world, but your email and your backup is in the same place, right? A lot of legal requirements, FINRA, and you name the alphabet soup of compliance, requires that your backup is something else, somewhere else, and that holds true even in the cloud world. It needs to be in a different set of data centers than your core data is in a lot of cases for those compliance requirements. So backup is a huge part of what you as a partner should be doing uh, on a on a recurring services basis, maintaining of
Does
that
that
data.
apply? Does that apply for everything? Is that Teams, OneDrive, Azure, VMs, email, right? It's
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. I mean, it's all in one house basically for Microsoft. Yes, it's in Azure, and yes, there's a bunch of data centers, and yes, there's geo redundancy, but it's all the same network. So
So as part of the calculators and the tools to do this assessment, is that backup stuff taken into account in the beginning, or is this something you have to figure out in addition to?
and I think it's something you have to figure out in addition to, because you have to get all the way behind the curtain to determine what needs to be what needs to be backed up, right? The types of ongoing services that MSPs can do around technology, not just relationship, is security management. SSO is going to be really important in this work from home world. SSO is a concept that not a lot of people know as an end user, right? BitTitan manages it for me, and I'll be damned, George, if something breaks on my SSO, I am completely and utterly lost when all of a sudden I can't log into this other thing. So that management of SSO for the layman end user that's not involved in technology is a recurring service MSPs should do. Backup is another thing. Virtual desktop is another thing. Voice, managing voice is an important thing that an end user doesn't understand the complexity. SIP trunking and all those other crazy terms. Voice, uh, I could probably think of a couple others. That security and patch management. So not just the SSO side, but making sure that a desktop is up all the time and running. Windows Defender, while it is an automated capability, the management running of it and regular backup of it, and deciding which patches make it through and which ones don't, is not necessarily a layman's product. I can't tell you guys how many times I've jacked up my desktop because I let things fly that I shouldn't have, right? So those are all things that I think become a part of the normal service portfolio. And if you think about those 4 or 5 things that I named, the skill is not in what those 5 things do. Yes, you as a partner needs to choose the right one of each one of those 5 things. It's in the packaging, right? It's the Starbucks concept. It's how you deliver it. A restaurant could have the world's best meal, but if service is bad, you're not going back to that restaurant, right? If they mess up your order, deliver the wrong thing, don't bring your drink automatically, those kinds of things, that's what provides a 3-star service for a restaurant. The same holds true in technology. It's the bundling of how you as a partner bring those things together.
So for the guy, you said there's like 5 different flavorings of MSP, right? Because everybody's
Yeah,
using the same acronyms. For the guys who are in the reoccurring, right? They're not in just the project business. If they're doing projects, it's because there's a long-term
yeah,
relationship,
exactly.
not for nothing, right? Specifically for those guys, what would the stack look like? Like, would you say, hey, all on Microsoft E5, everything Azure? Oh, and by the way, I'm going to charge $200 a user. Like what? Like what is that
No,
realistic? Like what does it
I
look?
I don't think so. I'm going to say something very dangerous. BitTitan, while we appear to be a Microsoft shop, we work in Google too, right? Google is one thing we do. There are certain attributes and things that are more ubiquitous. I think it is take a look at who your end user is. Where do they live? Uh, Google is very consumer friendly, right? There's it all works from a browser. There doesn't even need to be different technology sets. So in some cases, Google may be the answer as the base of collaboration. Um, I know that sounds like blasphemy, right? But you really have to evaluate your end user, because it's about the end user, not you as the partner. And you could be a partner that plays in both when it's necessary. The most successful MSPs are the ones who listen to their customers and provide what their customers need. And you can't do that being a single ecosystem MSP. So some of that is going to be Google at the core from a collaboration perspective. Some of that is going to be Microsoft. There's value to both from an Azure perspective. I'll tell you, I personally feel that Azure, for the most part, is a buzzword, right? It's a naked concept, right? What is sexy about Azure is something that was built on it, right? Whether it's Veeam or Datto backing up, where Azure is the back end. Again, it goes back to the wrapper and how things were built on top of it. BitTitan doesn't own its own data center. We play in GCP. We build off of GCP and Azure. But the idea of Azure as a naked server isn't necessarily good. That may be something that you as a partner creates. It's your flavor of VDI on Azure. Amazon has a really solid VDI capability. It's Microsoft licensing, but on AWS, right? Amazon's one of the world's biggest consumers of Microsoft licensing. So
Yeah, that's true.
Anyways, it's those kinds of things.
So Ken Patterson chimes in. He's like, Microsoft equals security, Google equals, and he left it blank. You want to fill in that?
No, man, damn, Ken, way to put me on the spot there. Google equals simplicity. Let's put it that way, right? It is not going to, and that's kind of where I was going with it. It is not going to be every customer that needs that, right? But if you've got a 3-person retail shop, adding that security into it is going to be the partner's responsibility. And I absolutely agree with Ken that Microsoft is the more secure of the solutions by far, light years beyond.
He came back and said simplicity for hackers too.
Yeah. Ken, I agree with all that, right? But if you've got an end user with a global business that is a small company that is trying to reach as many consumers as possible, Google Meets works well. I get that it's not the most secure, and that's where the evaluation and assessment comes into play in a lot of cases. There are ways to secure the Google side of things. It is not simple. I get all of that, but my concept isn't that it has to be Google either, right? If Google is not the right solution, all I'm saying is a multi-cloud approach is the right answer. Doesn't have to be Google.
Okay.
It could be
right.
AWS. I'll back off for our boy Ken and back off of a pro Google story there, but it is a multi-cloud first solution, right? It is evaluate for the end user. What are they capable of? You could simplify the Google solution. The Microsoft solution in a Chromebook type environment on behalf of your end user. It all goes back to the packaging.
So Brent, our favorite MSP initiative chatter inner says that was a great analogy for Azure is like an erector set or Legos, right? It's not a completely turnkey, right?
Yeah, it's not.
And he comes in and says, but what about what your employee knows to use? It is what your employee knows how to use from home, kind of thing, right? So what they're used to. But I think there's a little bit of training and education involved there, right? I think that's part of the
and you hit it, George. That is not only one of the challenges, but that education, that ongoing education and enablement, is part of the long-term revenue / value add opportunity for the MSP. It doesn't always have to be break, fix, or keeping things running. It's about efficiency, right? It's about the proper MSP. Long gone are the concepts of those. Man, I don't even remember what their names were, but there was a division of VARs that sold the education services. It's a one-stop shop now, right? It should be part of your package that you're offering as a successful MSP, not just to institute the right technology. And where I agree with you as a partner is it's very hard to be a jack of all trades. So you as a partner should identify what are your options. You always have to have multiple options, but you also need to have backup uh, as part of your plan is education on the technology that you're selling, no matter what it is. It's the enablement piece, because the valuable partner, no matter who you're selling as the core vendor, is the one who drives usage and consumption. It is long gone are the days in the cloud world of just selling some shit and hoping that people use it. You have to get people use, usage is what counts, right? So in order to drive that usage up, Microsoft is going to value you as a partner better if you are a full service partner, right? If you are driving the usage of all 5 or 6 things within M365, that's when you become valuable. And that's when you become valuable to multiple vendors, is where you're driving that average revenue per user up, and they're leveraging BVoIP when responsible, and they're leveraging BitTitan, and they're leveraging all of these things, and knowing when those pieces snap in. And we'll just keep down that Erector and Lego set, right? It's having that. Legos mean nothing to most people without that guideline or that blueprint, right? Without that instructable, I think they call it, right? You are the instructable as a partner, right? You're the guy telling them how to snap these things together to make it what they want.
Not fair. So Brent pops in and says he was really referencing Google products. Then he goes into the, Google's kind of gotten into, kind of like Apple did, right? They got into education at the really early, early education levels, right? Grade school, middle school, high school, and they kind of indoctrinated these people because, all these schools were giving them kind of free products, right, underneath of the school's, kind of offering. There's some truth to that, right? I mean, that they're just used to it, right? So they expect it once they get into the workforce.
For sure.
Last thing I want to touch on then is, we talked about backup, we talked about cloud now, we talked about having your game plan, we talked about, what happens after, after you get it going, right? I guess, and touching on Ken's thing, security now has become, like, I've heard of people's Office 365 accounts being entirely jacked. I don't know how often it happens, but I've heard it happening, where like all the data is basically cooked, right? And they have to try and restore. Have you heard of that? And when it comes to security, what's the recommendation now?
I have not heard of that before. And I've played in this game for a really long time. But with that being said, let me throw in my protective caveat. I'm on the migration side, right? So I typically don't see an end user long term. I know that we migrate securely. I know they land securely in O365, and I know that there are protection options on the back end, right? There's things like legal holds that prevent things from being deleted. There's different types of encryption that you can add to it. I haven't personally seen that from a product perspective, but if a partner is worried about that or an end user is worried about that, again, that's part of the value add that can be added to this, right? As a partner to protect that. I know that we migrate in a HIPAA compliant way. We'll sign the BAA agreement. I know that there's a lot to be said for Microsoft's security up front. For somebody to sign that BAA agreement, so if we will as the migration vendor and Microsoft will as a technology vendor, they're pretty darn confident in their security level, right? That things are being encrypted in transit, all that kind of good stuff. That can't be said about a lot of vendors nowadays. But if there is extra layers of security needed, that can be done, right? Encrypted pipes and all kinds of ways that can be added to that.
So let's then ask you, like, on, what are the top 5 things that could go wrong when things are being migrated then?
Well, one is data sprawl, right? That does exist in the cloud world, where you get that lifetime CEO who never deleted an email, and now 10 years later they're moving to the cloud. Yeah, right. And you have a 3 terabyte single mailbox that has lived as long as the CEO has been in business, right? That can cause some issues. Public folders tend to get very complex. public folders as a technology has come and gone and come again in multiple ways. And in a lot of ways, public folders is better served in a Teams type of environment than the concept of public folders. So public folders causes a lot of issues. And then whether it's mergers and acquisitions, but if you've got a tenant to tenant migration, and for some reason, someone with the same name exists on both sides, that causes everybody's world to break. So making sure that the same name doesn't exist in both places can cause some pretty substantial issues, especially in a merger kind of situation.
So appreciate you coming on today. I mean, we really actually went a lot of different ways,
Yeah, we
right,
did.
through the universe. How do people find you, your company, these resources that you say exist to help them figure out things like calculating things and assessing things and reviewing things before they get deep into the deep end?
Yeah, so I personally care about distribution. So whether it's Pax8 or any of the other guys, reach out to your sales team via distribution. If all else fails, sales at BitTitan is the best way to get a hold of the general team. And if you want to talk to me personally, I love to speak to partners and learn more about their business. It's lonc@bittitan.com. And I'd love to learn more and gain some knowledge from you guys.
Awesome. Lon, I really appreciate it. I hope we see you soon. You know, hopefully, you know, that's all
Get back on
is
the road,
behind
yeah.
us sooner rather than later. For everyone else, this session was absolutely recorded and will be available on MSP Initiative very shortly. MSPinitiative.com, on our, you know, landing page, YouTube, etc. You know, keep coming on board Tuesdays, Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern time. And we're going to have Lon back hopefully in the near future, where we try and pull some panels together where we talk about things like the cloud and maybe get some interesting views, right? Maybe Ken Patterson likes Microsoft and Lon will be the Google guy next time.
Oh, man, yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
You got it. Have a good one, everyone.